Captain, we have them. We've established Transporter Lock, the Star Trek Discovery podcast. Join Ken and Sabriel each week as they explore strange new episodes, seek out new plots and new characters, and boldly go where no podcast has gone before.
Hello and welcome to Transporter Lock, episode number 107 for Saturday, May 7th, 2022. I'm your co-host, Chief Engineer Ken Gaddy, and I'm joined by my captain.
It's Captain Sabriel Maston, and wow, we're finished with Season 2.
Season 2 of Picard. We are saying farewell to Season 2 after 10 episodes. The penultimate season of Picard is done. There is no more. It's done. We are saying farewell.
You know, I was reading an interview with Patrick Stewart. He said they finished filming Season 2 at 7 p.m., and the next morning, they started at 7 a.m. for Season 3. So this one's already in the can. They're just doing the post-processing now.
That is exciting. It's good to know that they have one more adventure to go. But in the meantime, we have this most latest adventure to review, and we're going to be reviewing both Season 2, Episode 10, and sort of in general Season 2 in its entirety, because we're not going to be doing a separate episode of a season recap. So, Captain Sabriel, in a word or two, what was your thought about Season 2, Episode 10, Farewell?
That's my outline.
Well, I'm asking you.
Question. Puzzled. Oh, wait, no, that's the response of you stealing my bit. Appreciative.
Appreciative. That is a good word.
Uh-huh. How about you?
Those words describe my reaction as well. I like those words. Those are good words and apt words. But I am going to go with bittersweet.
Okay, I can't wait to explore these feelings then.
As listeners to the show know, I really enjoyed the first 2 episodes of this season that were set either in the future or in an alternate timeline of the future, and then I really enjoyed the last 2 episodes where they finally brought everything together. I'm disappointed that there were 6 mediocre episodes, in my opinion, in the middle, but the last 2 episodes, in a way, almost makes it all worth it. They were so good.
Yeah, those middle... it's one of those things in retrospect. I mean, we were even saying at the time, those middle episodes... There are some, what's the word I'm looking for? Highs and lows, or like filler moments.
Mm-hmm.
Every episode had something good or useful, but there felt like some filler. And I think, again, goes back to the point we made before, where this feels like this season was probably made to binge, not watch week to week.
That's one of the things I'm wondering. As Steve Jobs once said, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And I'm wondering if I were to go back and rewatch Season 2, everything would make more sense, because now I see, that's why they did that. That's why they did that when they did that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it would seem less like filler if it has the full context of the season, but it doesn't change the fact that Season 2, Episode 10, Farewell, I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I had a lot of fun with it too. I had tears. I tweeted this out, but to someone, I don't remember. But at the moment when Will Wheaton appeared, I screamed at the screen I was watching. However, it was also about 7:30 in the morning. The only reason that the others who are in my house did not come down trying to see if I was okay is because the sounds of joy and laughter that came up afterwards. I did not expect that at all.
That was a well-kept secret, huh?
He kept that. Everyone kept that kept that secret so well. In fact, I understand that it wasn't even in the opening credits.
Oh, that's right. As you know, I often skip the opening credits to avoid spoilers, but they didn't put it there. That's a good point.
Apparently Guinan or Whoopi Goldberg was there,
yes,
but not Will Wheaton.
Yeah.
I thought that was so fun, and after the news that he wasn't going to be in Season 3 a few weeks ago, and his moment of his little fan fiction story that he wrote about him as a traveler a few weeks ago, the emotions all tied up with him there, and all of a sudden, bam, surprise! I knew it all along. He's basically telling us.
So I have a lot of thoughts and questions about that scene. My first one was, unfortunately, I didn't scream with joy. I my initial response was skepticism, because we have seen a lot of Star Trek actors in the first 2 seasons of Picard play multiple roles. And so when Will Wheaton showed up, I wasn't sure if that was Wesley Crusher.
Do you think it was a long lost ancestor?
Yes, it could have been an ancestor. It could have been somebody pretending to be Wesley Crusher. It could have been an entirely new character.
Or, hi, I'm Will Wheaton, and I just saw you walking around with a cool tech device. Would you like to come on my show tabletop?
Right. Also, 2 other things that influenced my opinion. One was I was just in a laundromat 2 weeks ago, and the TV was on, and they showed an episode of Big Bang Theory that Will Wheaton was on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm used to seeing Will Wheaton as Will Wheaton most recently, including on the Ready Room. And then also, so I'm a big fan of facial hair. I have some myself, and I like Will Wheaton's facial hair. But when I see him with facial hair, I see him as Will Wheaton, and I imagine Wesley Crusher as clean shaven. And so when Will Wheaton showed up, I saw him as Will Wheaton and not as Wesley Crusher.
So your brain is like, no, there are 30 years in between here that should not have happened. Wesley Crusher is a baby.
You can get to be 30 years older without growing a beard.
Yes, I can attest. Wow, no, interesting different reactions there.
To be clear, these aren't criticisms. I really enjoyed the show. I really enjoyed, his particular appearance in the show. I like that all season we've sort of been wondering, are we going to be learning more about who sends out these watchers? And we kind of did. We learned that they are the travelers, and Wesley Crusher is one of them.
So that was all we needed.
It was a really cool piece of lore to add to Star Trek, and that's a lore with a lowercase L.
It was more than I even expected to get.
Right.
And he has confirmed he is not going to be in season 3, though.
That was one of the questions I had for you. Does him appearing in season 2 soften the blow of him not appearing in season 3?
For me, it does. I mean, I think it would be great to have him there with his space family. And, maybe that doesn't necessarily mean doesn't make an appearance still. Even if he's not a cast member for the entire season or most of the season. So, cool. I'm not going to expect it, so if it happens, it's a pleasant surprise. But for me, cool. It feels like I got the Wesley Crusher closure that was requested, but didn't think I'd ever get.
And in context, or in character rather, imagine Wesley Crusher knowing he was so close in time and space to Captain Picard at such a critical point in Picard's life. Like, if I had been in that position, I would have wanted to go say hello to Picard, but I know I couldn't have because that would have influenced the timeline. But imagine Wesley Crusher, like, I wonder what he was thinking or feeling about his Next Generation captain at that moment.
Yeah. Also interesting, he met up with Corey at Echo Lake Park. I think that's the name of that park. The same place Talon met with JL earlier this season.
Okay, I was wondering if there was significance to that address. I didn't look it up, so I guess that is just the place where the past, present, and future tend to meet.
For me, I didn't look up the address. I looked up they did the aerial shot of that park, and it's a park you see in LA footage a lot. I remember even seeing it in the show Chuck. It was going around at the beginning of the pandemic about, look how quiet it is here, and things like that. It's just a famous park in LA, and I think that's Echo Lake Park, but any LA resident will probably go, Bree, no. It is the unechoic Lake Park, clearly.
Yeah, so him meeting with Corey, it's interesting. I liked his recruitment speech about it all being a tapestry, and in a way, he sort of is pulling her out of that tapestry because she is not going to be a part of the Prime timeline in a linear fashion anymore. I wonder why he chose her. What makes her special or unique? I mean, she was genetically engineered, but as far as I know, she's not like a superhuman, nor do you need to be a traveler, I think. But I'm just wondering what put her on his radar.
I don't need those answers watching that. For me, Corey is special on her own. That's enough for me.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I need the answer, but I still ask the question. Sometimes the questions are better than the answers, in my opinion. Here's another question. What sort, and maybe your knowledge of Star Trek, which tends to be more comprehensive than mine, will have an answer to this. Did you recognize the transporter beam effect?
It looked a lot like traditional transporter tech. It was not the same one that they used in the Traveler, which I don't think it was a flash of light. It was some weird other graphic. Times change. It sounded like TNG kind of thing a little bit, or some modern Trek. But no, it was not familiar.
Yeah. It very much looked and sounded Federation to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious if there is some involvement between the Travelers and some future iteration of the Federation. We may never know.
Remind me of the sound cue again when we talk about Dr. Soong again later on.
Okay. And that's sort of a related question, which is, who carries on the Soong genetic line? Because we know he has ancestors, or descendants, rather. I don't know.
He's a geneticist. He's going to go. He's got plans with the Khan guy. To me, he doesn't need some kind of mate to continue on that line.
Do you want to talk about Soong?
Yeah, we can jump up. Should we get there in order? Or do you want to jump to him?
I mean, it's sort of thematically related to what we're talking about, since we're talking about Corey.
Yeah, it is. Wow. Adam Soong completely fizzled out for me in this episode. So hard.
Fizzled out. What does that mean in this context?
He petered out as a villain. His final act, or his final arc was just, I'm a jerk, trying to get through somehow. In next year, they've learned nothing about quarantine and let people just see the people who've been in quarantine for 2 weeks. And I'm just a jerk who somehow gets across the world from France back to LA and can do anything. Oh, my plan doesn't work. I'm going to thrash around my apartment and, oh, my stuff got deleted. Oh, no. Well, good thing I kept this classified file with the word con on here in case there's a camera watching me. It was, his final bit here was just so, okay, gotta connect the dots and things we said it was going to happen. To me, it was, I didn't care one bit about him, and nor did I expect him to win or succeed at all.
He was not without negative effect on our heroes, but you're right. In the mission he set out to accomplish, he was ineffective ultimately. And we talked about maybe he would be redeemed, maybe his daughter would show up and be like, I need you, Dad. And that didn't happen. In fact, his daughter is the one who deleted all his files. And I recognize that cinematic technology is not the same as real IT, and that only in Hollywood do you not have backups, offsite backups of all your data with a lowercase d. But wow, she deleted everything, and then he pulls out that file.
She has a very powerful Microsoft Lens headset.
Right? And using a public library's Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad she did it. That part made sense to me. I thought maybe he would get some kind of redemption or nudge in redemption arc, but no, his bit with, like, I didn't believe the drone subplot with Rio 7 / Raffi was a danger at all. It felt like filler. That felt like a complete waste of time to have them running around his lab for this drone thing that clearly didn't happen. Was never going to happen, was never going to be a danger. His bit walking around NASA just being a jerk to it was just bad.
Yeah, I didn't like how condescending he was being to the people at NASA. And I know I brought this up before, but I still find it hard that given all the newspaper clippings that Corey found about him being a mad scientist and him being disbarred from all these places, and now he's lauded as a hero at NASA for donating a lot of money, I still find that inconsistent. But yeah, he is a jerk, man.
I don't know. Even the James Webb Telescope, people are finding out this guy was a complete jerk, and they're looking at trying to get them to rename it. So it happens even at NASA.
Mm-hmm. Is he still alive, James Webb?
No, I don't think so. I think he died a number of years ago.
Yeah, these legacies tend to come out after the fact, as social norms change and we re-examine the past.
Yeah. So Adam Soong, his finishing bit there petered out for me. Not that it was ever that strong in the first place to me, because I don't think that was intended to be the most interesting part of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was more about Jean-Luc's journey than
Yeah.
Adam himself.
Yeah, the most interesting scene Adam had was when he met Picard at the party, in my opinion.
I liked his bit when he was talking to Q earlier too in the season when they first met.
Yeah, he
in
seemed
the restaurant.
less of a bad guy at that point.
Yeah.
That was true.
Yeah. So again, I guess he was not intended to be a strong villain.
Mm-hmm.
He was supposed to be a minor foil who had, the story was built up on if we let him win, all this bad stuff happens. But he was not meant to be this huge mustache twirling behind everything villain. So I guess that's okay, but I've still felt underserved, if that's the right term.
No, I think that's accurate.
Yeah. So I guess he did his job in not being the most interesting thing about the season.
Good job.
Yeah, but
You fail at being a villain. Yay.
I felt it could have been better.
Mm-hmm. Slight tangent, that con folder he pulled out, I first interpreted it to mean that the eugenics wars were still on the way. They hadn't happened yet. And then I thought, well, maybe this is a folder that was produced as a result of the eugenics wars. But then I saw Strange New Worlds, and I'm like, no, this means that the eugenics wars haven't happened yet. So they are deviating from a previously established timeline for Star Trek, which had the eugenics wars happening in the 90s.
They are, in some way, maybe there was like a eugenics pre-war that people 400, like right now, we talk about wars hundreds of years in the past, probably not always to the exact year or whatever. I mean, we can know them, but you understand what I mean. We're talking about them more in generalities.
Right.
And so, yeah, I guess it does kind of adjust some established discussions, but who knows? The person who told us the eugenics were in 1996 or whatever in the 90s, Kirk, was correct as well.
Records of those era are spotty.
Exactly. They can tie it in.
It's a very convenient line for them to have added.
Yes, I think it was very much intentional, so they could adjust some things. Yesterday or today, I was reading an interview how like all the Trek shows currently going on right now talk to each other about canon, and apparently they were even fighting over who got Wesley Crusher. And Picard won out, not in a angry fight, more like a jovial, like we want him. No, we want him.
I wonder where else he could have showed up.
Lower Decks is a prime candidate.
Sure.
But he ultimately, clearly, now we've established he could appear anywhere.
Anytime, too.
Anytime. Anywhen.
That's impressive.
Yeah, there's some interesting things if you have not seen Strange New Worlds yet, that it is not a spoiler at all for me to tell you. It's just bring it up, that it's a discussion.
Yeah, I agree. And I do want to talk about that more on Strange New Worlds. But since we are talking about Wesley, I have two questions I meant to ask you about his scene with Corey. Sorry to go backward like this. In the context of Picard, not Next Generation, not any future spinoff or anything, but just Picard, do you think Wesley's scene with Corey added anything?
In the context of the events that happened here?
Yeah.
It answers the question that we probably weren't going to find an answer for. What happened to Corey?
Okay, cool. And my other question is, Wesley Crusher had a scene cut from Star Trek Nemesis. That scene I just discovered in the last month or two.
Oh, really?
Is on YouTube. I had never seen it before. I always knew it had been cut, but I thought it was lost.
Oh, yeah, it's there. It was bad. It was a good reason to cut it. Fucking freaking Berman and that writing.
You didn't think it was in character for Wesley Crusher?
Even at that point, he had been traveling. They were just, no.
Okay.
Hey guys, girls, remember girls? Girls are good. I like them a lot on Next Gen. I mean, it was so bad.
That's a very accurate impersonation.
Thank you. I actually hit play on YouTube.
Nice. So my question is, even though that scene was cut, he was nonetheless in Nemesis.
Mm-hmm.
You can see him at the party scene in his Starfleet white uniform.
Yeah, you can see his new nose on the very side of the screen.
So does that mean that he traveled and then came back and joined Starfleet and then joined the Travelers?
We don't know. He just dressed up for the occasion.
That's possible. I mean, as a Star Trek alumnus, it's not Star Trek, Starfleet, maybe he had permission to wear that apparel and that he didn't actually join Starfleet for the occasion. But again,
Or
it's
he's
not a
still,
question.
or he's still technically in Starfleet. They never said, "No, you are kicked out." What's that term when they have there's a term for when like Navy ships are lost, but they're still considered in service.
I don't know that term.
I would go on these Wikipedia rabbit holes
Not
all the time in my
certainly
old
not
job.
missing in action.
No, but there's a term for it. They say basically a ship is still in service even after they're gone.
Interesting. Well, maybe that's what happened to Wesley Crusher. He was in service, just missing in time and space.
Or maybe it wasn't even considered missing.
Maybe he came back and turned in his resignation. Hey, didn't want you guys worrying about me, so here I am. Okay, so thank you for that tangent. While let's go back to talking about Adam Soong, and that ties into a lot of other stuff actually, because the Borg Queen last week left us with a prophecy that there had to be two Renees, one who lives, one who dies, and we saw Talon fulfill that prophecy. I had thought that maybe we would see something like this happen because we've seen it in other shows where there was a episode of The Flash that did something similar, for example. What did you think of that solution?
He sounded to me like she knew it was going to happen, or possibly. Would I like it, or did I like it? Yeah, I thought it was going to be happening. When it was Renee at first, for the first like 30 seconds, I was like, wait, really? But then, oh wait, no, they did a switcheroo. And then when Talon or Renee calls Jean-Luc, then I'm like, oh, definitely. And then like 30 seconds later, whoosh.
Yeah, so I think her death served a very important purpose, and I don't think it should have gone any other way from a literary perspective, plot-wise, because, well, technologically it could have gone other ways. Like, we saw her very much earlier in the season controlling people in the park, like manipulating them and making them say and do things. Why couldn't she have done that to Adam Soong? But her death, for me, the most important part about her death was not saving Renee. It was twofold. One, her getting to talk to Renee. That scene was so beautiful.
Oh no, that was great, and I think her Talon's death would have been better. Not that they could have rearranged it so it lost a lot of emotional meaning for Talon to be dying with JL than like Renee. For me, the emotional impact. I don't know how it was going to make sense, but her dying in JL's arms didn't really feel as emotional to me. However, I thought it was great. I thought it was beautiful that she finally got to talk to Renee. I loved that scene. I thought it was wonderful. And that Renee Picard was clearly like, okay.
Yeah, Renee trusted her, even though she had every reason not to. She did, and I really love that connection that they finally had after a lifetime of observation. And observation, that is why Wesley Crusher used the words watch and observe, because that's what they do. I finally figured that out. But the other thing that Talon's death really did for me, and maybe this ties into something you didn't like about her dying in JL's arms, but I feel like JL had recently been taught the lesson that that he is not responsible for other people's deaths. And Talon really drove that home. Like, it was a historical example to him previously with his mom, and she made it a present example. And she gave him an actual lived opportunity to practice that lesson. And I thought Picard's growth needed her to die.
No, that makes sense. She's been telling him what I was in the season is all about. He basically has to stop taking all that responsibility on himself. And her death served that purpose. It was still sweet and tender, and it kind of reminded me when they watched the rocket up in the air of his moment in the
Inner Light.
Yeah, Inner Light. watching the rockets go up in the air.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how he said to her, "Look up," just like his mother said to him.
Mm-hmm.
Does make me confused why the Borg Queen then said it to him, because she is neither of those people. But
No, she was trying to make him feel at home, comfortable, understand it's going to be okay.
Well, that's one of the reasons why when Picard said look up to Talon, and last week we saw the Borg Queen set off to save the dying, I was like, wait, Talon has now heard Picard say look up. Does that mean she is going to join the collective and say it back to him? That's where my mind went when he said
wow, I did not at all. No, Queen left. So there was no her coming back to pick up Talon.
Right. I was trying to figure out, how does that work? Does she be like, oh, sorry, I forgot something. Oh, while I'm here, I see Talon's dying. Let me help you with that.
No, did not occur. I did not have that thought at all.
Well, now, anytime I see somebody dying, I'm going to be like, where were the Borg when we needed you? Come on.
I'll let you live that disappointment yourself.
This is fine. Well, it's kind of like in Star Trek Into Darkness. Like, oh, we've cured death now. All we need is eugenics blood. Great.
Khan and Triple Blood. No, but
right.
Yeah. Or at least in that moment. Maybe the circumstances of him where you have to have died inside a starship on the Enterprise. The Khan blood only works in extremely rare instances.
Very specific context, yes. And again, this isn't me making fun of Star Trek. I love everything that they do for the most part. I mean, some things are better than others, but when you have 800 plus episodes, I understand that sometimes you need to break the mold. As Captain Pike would say, what's the point of having rules if you can't break them?
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't help but point out these inconsistencies and where they should logically go, but that doesn't make me love it less.
If they spent all their time on Wikipedia, they would never get a show written.
Right.
Or Memory Alpha.
And this is why back in the 80s, DC Comics had Crisis on Infinite Earths, because they had 50 years of story and history, and they were stepping on themselves and on each other with the convoluted stories. And they're like, let's simplify, let's reboot, get rid of all these Infinite Earth, and just focus on one. And unfortunately, they eventually undid that, because after 30 or 40 years, they're like, things are boring on just one Earth. We need some room to grow. We need to expand. But
now we have Infinite plus one. They finally got my kiss. Raffi and
Sam. Yes. I was. Who else would I be thinking of watching that scene except you, Sabriel?
It was beautiful and everything I wanted.
Yeah. It was very. I'm glad that we got it sometime this season. It would have been. It would have left us hanging. Yeah, exactly.
And they've been skirting that line of queer baiting for too long. Like, I don't know. There are times where it would have made sense to have their moments before, but also it made sense to not until now. But I'm glad they finally did it. I finally got through that, and these two characters can now move on through some things that they've been working and struggling with for a long time.
Yeah.
Seven with her Borg self, and Raffi's fear of being alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that Raffi put forward the idea that she would take some time alone to work on herself. And I hope that Seven's kiss wasn't like, that's a stupid idea.
Not one bit. That did not come across at me at all.
Yeah. Because you can work on yourself and be with somebody else. Sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier.
No, that didn't occur to me at all. And we got Captain Seven. Seven once again gets Rios' ship.
Oh, that's right. Once again, I hadn't thought of it that
way. She looks so good on there. Besides Seven herself looking, and Jerry Ryan looking amazing. But she looked very confident in that seat. Even did the lean into the captain's chair. So good. She got that bit that so many dudes have gotten before. And she got to have that role instead, which was aces. She even got to tell them, do not resist to the about the Borg.
When she said that line, I was like, really? Are you saying that resistance is futile after all this time?
That's why she said, do not resist.
Yeah, that was a very deliberate word choice. And
tell them resistance is futile.
Oh.
No, changing it up.
But if she had said that, the rest of the fleet would have been like, "Oh, that ship is definitely compromised."
Yep.
I love that she didn't hesitate to sit in that chair.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that brought me so much joy. She was there and just leaned into it so hard and not trying to reference the Sandberg thing.
The what
Just
thing?
what's her face from Facebook or Meta? What's her name with her lean in book?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But she leaned into the situation, and I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah. And this gives me more hope, not realistic hope, but hope nonetheless, that we someday will get a 7 spinoff.
Star Trek 7,
Because
and not Star Trek 7.
that'd be Star Trek Generations. Yeah.
That's why they couldn't call it Star Trek 7 back then. They had to change up the naming scheme.
What? Wait, why could? Oh, they couldn't call it 7 because of 7 of 9.
Of course, clearly they had this plan 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Someday she's going to get a spinoff, and we can't have that name assigned to a movie. So we are on the bridge of the. Sorry, what's Rios' ship's name?
Stargazer.
Oh, yeah, Stargazer. That's right. So we're now on the Stargazer as we're talking about this, but I want to go back before we talk about the Borg, because that brings up for me a whole bunch of questions about timelines and stuff. I want to talk about the scene between Picard and Q in the Solarium.
Want to jump right to there?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because that scene, I've only watched it once now, but I have been living it and reliving it in my head ever since. And I don't do that with a lot of cinema. Like, I think the last time I relived something in my head that often was Avengers Endgame. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. I think this scene has become one of my favorite scenes in all of Star Trek history.
Interesting. Fascinating. It was absolutely beautiful. I cried both times I viewed it. I was right. It was a gift to JL.
Yeah.
And the JL, he even told him, like, he has to, now he can learn to basically to let someone love him, to love. It was a beautiful gift, and telling him just because it was just you, because you matter. Oh,
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, he started the season, Q, by suggesting that the trial never ends, and this was implied to be some sort of a test. And even Picard asked, am I going to be needed for some sort of galactic import? And Q was like, why does it always have to be something like that? And Picard was like, then why does it matter? And Q was like, you matter to me. I was like, oh my God, like, Picard didn't see that. There are two connotations there. One, that Picard matters, and one, that Picard matters to Q. I mean, they have had such a fraught relationship. And even in this season, Picard has been saying, I'm sick of playing your games, Q, and yelling at him, and Q slapping him and giving him his bloody nose. And that's not something I do with my friends, especially when I'm giving them gifts.
Well, you are also not, you are not an omnipotent being.
Well, there are a lot of differences there. Yeah, that's definitely one of them. But wow, after all this time, Q cared.
He was telling him all that stuff just to get JL to do something. He wasn't. Q has always been a trickster god. He's always played his little games. He told him exactly what JL was expecting to hear to get him to do something, and to have JL's actions were all, this is because of Q, and maybe Q was the instigator, but it wasn't because of Q. It was because of himself. I've been saying JL knew exactly what it was. He did the whole time. He never let himself admit it. He never admitted it the entire season. But we'd see it in his eyes. We would see it in his motions.
Mm-hmm.
That he needed to let go. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was getting Picard to that point, getting him to understand it, to acknowledge it and admit it. And also, like I said, just the things that Q admitted about himself. Like, he said, I'm dying, and Picard says, I know. Like, we had never actually... I think the only person Q admitted that to was Guinan, so Guinan must have told Picard. But then Q completes the sentence, alone. I'm dying alone, and I don't want that for you. And the old Q he would have just snapped his fingers and given Picard some buxom blonde. They're like, what, isn't this what you want? But he was more authentic. He let Picard work it out for himself, which is amazing.
He's always done that, though, hasn't he?
Sometimes. I would have to go back and rewatch some of the Q episodes. I did recently see the end of one of his episodes with Voyager, his third and final episode on Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Janeway actually had an affectionate relationship. They were playful with each other, and I had forgotten that. I just thought he was always a jerk, but he's not always a jerk.
I mean, Janeway's like, can't you just snap us home? And he tells him, well, then something along the lines of what's the point of the journey?
Yeah, what example would I be setting for my son?
That's what it was. Yeah, it was Q2. Or the hug at the end, and the tears you could see welling up in his eyes as John Delancey and Q. It was beautiful.
So I commented last week about how I was disappointed that Picard didn't cry when Talon hugged him. And I still think that's a missed opportunity. But this week, we saw Picard express physical affection for another man, or a male representing species. And that's not the first time we saw that. We commented on Transporter Lock last season about how Picard and Riker were sitting by the lake with their arms around each other. And so I love that consistency. I love seeing these small gestures that nonetheless break gender norms of the early 21st century. I thought that hug was so important and so powerful because we had learned in the Solarium that Q cared about Picard. In this scene, we saw that Picard cares about Q.
I mean, it's also just attested to, again, old age as well, which is beautiful. Friends saying goodbye.
Which you don't always get to do.
Mm-hmm. It's like we may get this, I mean, obviously characters-wise, but we may get to see each other again, but I'm saying, have your closure then, so
Yeah. And we may never see Q again because we presume he's gone. I don't know. We don't know why he was dying. I don't know if it was old age or if it's the entire Q continuum that's dying. We know that they can reproduce. We saw that. So I hope that there are still Q out there and that little Q isn't now gone as well. But
he even said, in your parlance, I'm dying. So whatever that means to Q, it probably is as close to an analogous thing and he could compare it to.
Yeah.
And Q got to go out as a shining star instead of a dying star. Because he was telling Guinan, he's fading out. So, yeah, he got that.
When he appeared in the woods, Rafi put her hands around his throat.
He started saying, you mother effer.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the only person Q had previously appeared to this season was Picard and Guinan.
I think so.
Okay. So Rafi was making a logical leap that the person she was seeing was Q, because she didn't know that for sure.
I mean, for all we know, they've had pictures in the past of this being. He's appeared on the bridge. It's probably pretty clear who it is, too. Then maybe you just know when you're in the presence of Q that it's Q. If you know him, because clearly Renee didn't. But or if he wants it, you know it.
Maybe he's like The Sims. He has a little green crystal over his head that says Q.
Maybe. Or, it's just these characters know each other for a while. It makes sense for her to know. To me, it made sense for her to know him.
Well, I mean, I was thinking something similar about how I don't think Guinan met anybody but Picard in this season either. I don't think she hung out with Rios or Rafi or Seven.
At least that we saw.
Right. And so...
there was a scene where young Guinan was with some of them.
Was there?
In the bar, wasn't there? Yeah, because they were talking and then they got oh, no. It was just JL. Nope. I was confusing some scenes. I was conflated some scenes. Doesn't mean she doesn't know. She has a very long lifespan. She even told us in the bar that she couldn't tell JL anything. She knew the whole time what was going to happen here. For all we know, young Guinan did know who he was, but she had to play it off to make sure events happened. I know there was concern about, like, what about this episode that happened? Like, nothing here negated that episode happening. Young Guinan was just playing it like she didn't know JL.
And I still feel it's a little inconsistent with Time's Era. We had a in-universe explanation earlier in this season, and I don't feel like it's valid anymore.
See, I don't think it's inconsistent.
You think that Guinan was pretending not to know Picard?
She said at the end. She didn't call it that scene, but she said, like, I couldn't tell you. I knew if I guided you, you would get to where you needed to be.
That's what she was talking about?
The whole lifetime, everything that's happened now.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that.
She doesn't talk about that specific moment or even necessarily the specific events here. She couldn't tell Jean-Luc all these decades she's known him about these events because she knew. Because she didn't want to mess up with the timeline.
No, I get that. I get that in the time between when Picard season 2 ended and when TNG began, and even over the course of TNG and everything afterwards, she couldn't say anything. But I think in Picard season 2, she legitimately did not know who Picard was.
Huh. See, I could see that, but I also think she did. That's just me. We don't know how Illyrians work, and how they flow through time exactly.
Yeah, I just don't see the benefit to her pretending, because they would have both already met in Time Zero, so they both would have known each other by the time of Picard season 2.
I don't pretend to know, and I could be wrong. To her, apparently, to her, it felt like she had to play it off.
I was a little disappointed with what she told us about how Rios died in a
Really?
bar fight. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad for everything he and Teresa did in their lifetimes with founding of the butterflies, etc. But, I mean, granted, as she said, he died as he lived, with his boots on. But
and a cigar in his mouth.
That's true. But I'm thinking, I apologize, I don't remember his name, but there are only so many people who have ever walked on the moon. And one of those astronauts came back to Earth and died in a motorcycle accident. And I was just like, for a piece of living history to die in such a meaningless way. And maybe Rios' death wasn't meaninless because he was fighting over medical supplies. But imagine finding out the person you just killed with a knife in a bar traveled 400 years from the future to be there. That just makes it all the more profound a loss, in my opinion. But I'm glad that he got his lifetime with Teresa. I wish we had seen more of them together in this episode, because I like it when
barely had any lines.
Exactly. I like it when she's fiery, and this week we only saw her sort of doing the side hug with Rios and putting her hand on his belly, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, her bit there was not any part of her. We just didn't get any of her. Basically, just raising Ricardo as a piece of cake. I mean, yeah. Both times I watched this, she did not get enough to say here. She was just the eye candy, more or less, and that was unfortunate.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and especially with Rios last week, just saying that he's thought about it and he can't stay behind. And then this week he changed his mind. I wish we had gotten a little bit more of the internal dialogue that helped him get from one decision to the other.
Yeah, I can fill in those gaps in my head, but it would be neat to see it. They're not restricted to 1 hour. I know they shoot for it, but they're not restricted to it.
Yeah, imagine a scene in this week where Rios or Teresa were in mortal danger, and it made them realize just how important the other person was to them. And then I'd be like, yeah, you gotta stay, because you've almost lost it, and now that you know what there is to lose, you have to hold on to it all the more tightly. We didn't get that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the character I really enjoyed. I honestly thought he was going to stick around until basically the cast announcement for season 3. Then I was like, I could see it going either way now.
Is he in season 3?
No.
Oh.
The fact that he was announced or not announced as part of it either. Same with Elnor.
Oh, he's not in season 3.
He just put it on Instagram like a day or two ago that he's not going to be in season 3.
Well, you and I were wondering how much of the Picard crew and the TNG crew were going to overlap, and I guess we're narrowing those options.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a lot of people to put on there, but I guess we'll see how it works out. It's a bummer. I also find it a bummer that Elnor only got a Zoom call in the end, and not actually got to like hug Raffi or something like that.
Remind me, at the beginning of this season, in episode 1, was he on the Excelsior?
Yeah, I saw that episode twice and I've already forgotten, but I'm pretty sure he was assigned to the Excelsior.
Okay. And were you surprised to see that he was brought back to life?
No, when Q said, maybe there's a little bit of energy, I've got a little surprise for you. No, not surprised one bit. Happy. I smiled that he was there, but I wish Raffi even could have said, we'll talk about it later. Harmonize the shields. Do the thing. But I'm happy he was there. His final scene in the show was a call.
Yeah.
I mean, no, correction. He was a 10 forward. He was a 10 forward. He did
that's
get a
right.
scene.
He did drank
scene.
that stuff
That's
that
what
was disgusting.
I was
Is it supposed to
worried.
burn?
What's that? It's alcohol. Oh, hold on. Being you, not being a drinker, I thought you were actually asking. Yes. But that was also funny.
Sorry to throw you off. Didn't mean to.
No, he did get a final scene. That's right. I even just finished this episode a second time before we talked about it. The Zoom call was just stuck in my head.
No, that's fair. I didn't know when Q said a little surprise what he meant, so that was a nice surprise for me. And it's nice to think about the fact that Rio staying behind is what brought Elnor back.
Yeah. I mean, we never know what Q's saying, but I'm pretty sure it's what he was trying to imply. But
Yeah.
Q being Q. But I think that's what he meant.
Yeah, me too. I like that. The only thing we haven't talked about, which we still need to, as far as I know, unless I've overlooked anything else, is Agnes.
Oh yeah. Yep. She was the Clockwork Queen. And we found out and resolved the galactic threat in 5 minutes. Not a whole season.
That'll be a different season or a different show.
And I saw some people be like, why didn't she tell Picard sooner so he would have known it was her? Well, she had to make sure the timeline happened the way it did so she could be there to say it. She couldn't tell Picard until things flashed back to the way she was expecting.
It is a little confusing, though, because it means that Agnes was on the Stargazer the first time when it did blow up, and then she got brought back in time by Q and lived another 400 years, and now got to be on the bridge again of the Stargazer from the other side. And she just hoped that this time it would turn out differently, when she didn't know for sure that it would.
No, she was very attuned to the time pathways. We've seen that before.
Okay. See, I hadn't thought of that, and that's a great answer. Thank you.
Yeah, both. So if you were a person on that bridge, all of a sudden both Agnes and Rios disappeared.
Yep.
And now an XB captain is telling you, listen to this other XB who is now going to be captain, or admiral, whatever,
Yep.
to listen to the Borg. Like, okay, boop, boop, boop. I'm going to push these buttons and just hope.
Yep. The crew of the Stargazer had all manners of reasons to be suspicious, as we discussed,
but I'm glad they didn't.
It does mean, though, that they have been out there for 400 years. They did send 400-year in the future technology back to the 21st century with which to create this new species. It does mean that Q was always meant to meddle with the timeline, just like those bullet holes that Picard found in his chateau. Which means that Q is the one who emancipated Corey from Soong, and she then deleted the files, which then led Soong to open the Khan file. So it could be Q's fault that we had the eugenics wars when we did, at least. There's just so many implications to what Q has done here.
To me, it sounds like everything played out exactly as it was supposed to. Nothing changed about the timeline.
Right. But it's sort of a predestination paradox. Like, things played out the way they're supposed to because Q had already or always had meddled with the timeline. I don't know.
As Janeway said.
Right? It's confusing. And also, like,
time.
well, like, they were trying to, like, they said, oh, we got all these broken tricorders and comm badges, so we eliminated all the butterflies. What about all the Borg soldiers you killed and all the kids they're not going to have now?
Apparently they were already going to be assimilated.
Right, because they already had.
This is just as much Q's fault as it is John Luke's, as it is Rappy's, Seven's, Wesley Crusher's.
Wesley.
I mean,
do you think that Q meant for Picard to go back into the past? Because he said to Guinan, I didn't do that. He did it to himself.
Yeah, he knew it was going to play out this way. He can see every time of event at once.
So he
knew all along it was going to play out this way.
Because I was trying to figure out if Q didn't mean for Picard to go back in the past. He just wanted Picard to see the end of the road not taken. 400 years of conquering, and now you are the Borg Slayer. If that was the context in which Q wanted to learn, he wanted Picard to learn that lesson, I wonder how that would have played out. Like, how does becoming the Borg Slayer help him overcome what happened to his mother? It's a very... Even if Q meant for him to go back into the past, it's a very convoluted way to learn that lesson.
That's Q to me. I mean, we saw him be Robin Hood. We saw him in his vicious animal things, killing Wesley with a bayonet. I mean, we see him do lots of things.
It's true. We cannot fathom the ways of the gods.
Literally, exactly. I mean, no, it feels like a cop-out in some extent, but that's meant to be an omnipotent character that we are not meant to understand everything about. He is not human.
Even though he consistently appears as such, we have to remind ourselves that he is not.
Star Trek Picard, to me, is giving, and I suspect season 3 is going to be the same. It's giving me closure with TNG in ways that I didn't think we'd ever get, or thought we even. I mean, okay, here with Picard so far, we've gotten closure or something close to it with Q, Guinan, Data, and even Wesley. And season 3, we're getting all the original cast back together, minus
everybody
Tasha.
else,
all the Alive Bridge crew. It feels like we're getting a better send off than Nemesis, and I appreciate that. I like it.
Me too. I feel like season 1 of Picard, we got that closure on Data, but I feel like season 2 was a greater quantity of closure.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it did have to not just close the lore, the lowercase l, but expand it. Like, we didn't really know anything about Picard's mother except for that season 1 episode of TNG. And now we have a new context with which to go back and watch that episode, and maybe even go back and watch all the episodes where Picard was dating people, and watch for how it played out and how and why it didn't work out.
Yeah. IGN, the website, rated this one of the worst seasons of Star Trek ever. And I don't know what rates as best, but wow. Opinions on this throughout the universe, our world, have been very mixed, and I liked it. I think there are plenty of things that could have gone better or been done better, but overall, I liked the season. I liked it a lot more than season 1. I remember, I know we just watched it, but I already remember so much more, and things meant so much more to me in season 2 than it did in 1.
I liked 40% of this season.
I mean, really, really liked it. I mean, there's bits here and there, but...
Yeah, like, Teresa wasn't really a big part of the episodes I liked, and yet I really liked the parts that she was in of the 6 episodes I didn't like. So it's very uneven and inconsistent.
Yeah,
but to say it's worse than like TNG season 1, oof.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like TNG season 1 had a lot of things that were seeds to later stuff that were great. But yeah, basically, calling it one of the worst seasons of Star Trek ever is oof.
And also, we have to take into account that season 1 of TNG had, 22 episodes? And this only had 10?
TV was very different back then.
Certainly was, yes.
Have they not seen season 3 of TOS? I mean, come on.
I'm not sure I have, so I can't weigh in on
it's
this.
okay. But I've never, ever in my life thought to call something the best season over season of Star Trek. And with seeing IGN's headline, like, wow. They just thought like a lot of it was a waste of time and filler. Things that we've said before, but we didn't think it meant it was terrible. We just thought it could do better. Like mediocre, middling. Like the whole everything that Seven, Raffi, and Rios did for the most part in this season didn't matter. It was filler, but I think that it will serve better in a binge watch. But it doesn't change that their stuff didn't matter. So I would have loved to see more of that. It was the Jean-Luc season, and that's what the show was about him. So hey, of course he's gonna be a main star of his own show.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've often thought that season 4 of Enterprise was some of the best because it tied so much into Star Trek lore. And Picard season 2 did some of that too.
Yeah. So, well, I don't know what would be the best or worst. I don't think this would. I don't feel this qualifies as worst.
Yeah. Also, briefly, we should mention that the Borg, they're still calling them the Borg.
Yeah,
which is,
they mentioned the Legion word.
Yeah, because there are the Borg that we have always known for the last 20, 30 years out there. Those are they're not mutually exclusive. And it doesn't seem accurate to call them both Borg. But this Borg requested provisional membership in the Federation so that they can be guardians of the gate.
So whatever this future bad thing is going to be.
Yeah, kind of like how DS9 was the gateway to the Delta Quadrant. Now the Legion is the gateway to whatever this transport conduit leads to. And they said that they know it's a threat, which, given the massive destructive power of the formation of the transport conduit, is a reasonable assumption that it is a threat. But without knowing who created or where they're coming from, we don't know for sure.
Yeah. Agnes just said, even with our collective minds, we don't know. So that means it has to be something that is new to the timeline.
Well, hopefully everything past this point is.
Yeah. Otherwise, overall, I had a good time with this season, and I can't wait to watch it again.
I will not be watching it again, but I'm not doing that exclusively to this season. I'm just not a rewatcher. I have other Star Trek to watch. Speaking of which, shall we share our plans for Strange New Worlds?
Yeah, hit it.
So Strange New Worlds has debuted. Oh, I got what you did there. I really enjoyed Cinco de Mayo. I opened the day by watching Picard. It's the first thing I did in the morning, and I got home late at night and watched Strange New Worlds. It was a great bookend to end something and then begin something. And Strange New Worlds is out. It's going to run for 10 episodes, and we are going to be covering it on Transporter Lock, but not to the extent that we have been covering Picard and Discovery, because when we started this podcast 5 years ago, Discovery was the only Star Trek on the air, and we had no reason to believe that there would be anything else. And so we were doing like 10 to 14 podcast episodes a year. There's a lot more Star Trek to cover now, and we, right now, have recorded more episodes of Transporter Lock in the first 4 months of 2022 than we did in all of 2021 in the 12 months of that year. And by the time Strange New Worlds is over, if we were to do one podcast episode per episode of that show, we would record more episodes than we did in 2020 and 2019 combined in just the first 6 months of this year. So for our own benefit, mostly, to pace ourselves so that we don't burn out, so that Transporter Lock stays alive and well into the future, we're going to cover Strange New Worlds at a slightly scaled back pace. We are going to review the first episode, which just aired. We'll be doing that early next week. And it sounds like due to some scheduling, there will be me and a guest covering that. And then Captain Sabriel, you and I will reunite to check in mid-season after episode number 5. So we'll be talking about episodes 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we'll come back and talk about the end of the season after episodes 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 have aired. So we'll be doing 3 podcast episodes to cover 10 episodes of Strange New Worlds. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Excellent. So that is our plan. We have finished Picard. We're not going to do a separate episode that recaps the whole season because we sort of did that today.
We
and
tied
we
it in
feel
here.
like, yeah, we've been pretty comprehensive throughout the season, thinking about what our thoughts were on this episode. So that brings us to the end of Picard season 2. So we're going to, like I said, cover Strange New Worlds, and there will be more Discovery, more Lower Decks, more Picard, and more Prodigy, and we'll figure out how we're going to cross those galactic barriers when they arrive. But there will definitely be more Transporter Lock with your captain and chief engineer in the future. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Fantastic. Until then,
See you out there.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on iTunes and keep your hailing frequencies open by following us on Twitter at TransporterLock or subscribing to our podcast and email newsletter at transporterlock.com.
Hey guys, girls, remember girls? Girls are good. I like them a lot on Next Gen.